One thing you will need with you during the presentation, if I can find it, is your mobile, which I imagine most of you have probably got quite close to you anyway. So I'm going to take a few little things that are happening in the space, just give some evidence of how it's growing, and then talk about some of the things that we've seen at Insight222 about things that companies that are doing this really well are doing, and there'll be a couple of examples of case studies as well. I've made them quite simple case studies for people maybe that are a bit earlier in their journeys, but also where you can see what the business value is of them as well. So, without further ado, some of you have seen me present before, will have seen this slide, but 69% of large organizations, that's companies with 10,000 employees or more, now have a people analytics team. So I think it's safe to say that the practice has well and truly arrived. We're not on the periphery of HR anymore. If anything, we seem to be moving very much towards the center of HR, getting involved in HR strategy, and some of the things that we've seen over the last few days, important things like employee experience, understanding productivity, understanding collaboration, burnout, some of the stuff that Rob was talking about this morning. So, we could be proud that we've arrived. I think some of those teams are probably still stuck in doing reporting, but the fact that they've rebadged to people analytics shows that the ambition is there. And I think we'll just see this number continue to rise over the next few years as well. And it's not just large organizations. I've seen a lot of smaller organizations as now putting people analytics teams in place. There was some research from LinkedIn which said that over 20% of all companies now on LinkedIn have some sort of people analytics activity going on. So good stuff. More companies doing it means more people. So this is research that LinkedIn did last year. They looked at North America over a period of 5 years to 2018, and they found that there was 3 times as many people on LinkedIn last year who listed HR analytics or people analytics skills as there had been 5 years previously. They did similar surveys in Asia Pacific, where the increase was pretty spectacular. And in Europe, they only looked at it over a period of a year, and then the period in Europe was gone up by 61%, which seems quite significant. Now, just because you write a skill on LinkedIn doesn't mean you necessarily got it, but it's interesting that people are actually listing those as well. So more people and then more demand. So Ian this morning showed some research that we did at My HR Future when we actually asked HR professionals the skills that they wanted to learn. And you may remember that Ian showed those 6 skills. So those are listed there. But what he didn't show this morning was that actually that people analytics was a skill that most HR professionals, this isn't people analytics professionals, this is HR professionals, wanted to learn, which is a good sign, because we've been talking through the last 2 days about the importance of getting the rest of HR on board, particularly HR business partners, and creating that data-driven approach to things. So quite impressive. A couple other things about the stats. By the way, while I'm talking, if you click the scan me or just take a picture of that on your phones, and you can actually download the report as well. And there's a link there for when the slides come out as well. The other skills was 70 different things. And then there were some people who said that they didn't need to learn any new skills, which doesn't really talk well to the lifelong learning that Ian was talking about this morning. I'm not sure I'd want to hire someone that said they didn't need to learn anything in this day and age, but interesting nevertheless. And why is people analytics growing? Well, we've seen a lot of that over the last 2 days, I think. Some of the stuff that we're getting involved in with our teams now, really big, meaty business challenges that our organizations have got. But I think one of the other reasons why people analytics is growing is it's not just to benefit one part of the organizations. Yes, it can help leaders hopefully make more informed decisions about people and help with business strategy, site location and stuff like that, skills for the future. I think it can really help managers by democratizing data and giving them the information they need to run the business, but also giving managers insights about their own behaviors and how those behaviors may impact positively or negatively on our teams. And we're seeing a lot more of that now, some of the nudge-style technologies that are coming in. Employees, we talked a lot over the last 2 days about employee experience and personalizing the employee experience as well, and analytics-based products that can help push relevant learning material, relevant career advice to employees as well, and actually measure in real time, not continuously maybe, Bridie, but at least part of the time, what people are saying within the organization, what that actually means. And certainly IBM, we did turn some of that into some really interesting insights that help support efforts to improve employee experience. What we don't talk a lot about is actually how people analytics can benefit HR. It can help our CHROs look better, to be perfectly honest, because they're actually bringing insight to the top table. It can help HR as a profession get better, and it can support recruiters, HR business partners have more informed discussions with the business. So I think everyone within the organisation should benefit from people analytics, particularly if we follow the theme of people analytics for good, or people data for good. So, but it's still quite hard. We've talked today, and Brad, Vanessa, that was a fantastic session there. We talked about some of the challenges involved in really excelling with people analytics. And in the business that we're in, with Al and Ian and Dirk, who's presented over there, and Stacey that's here, and Jonathan Farrar, who some of you may have seen present before. We get asked a lot of questions by companies at varying stages of maturity when it comes to people analytics. Some of them got one person, some of them got 70. And actually, when Jonathan and I sat down last year, we tried to analyse some of the questions that we were getting. And we thought that they really all fell into three main categories. How can I improve my impact? So my impact as a people analytics leader, my impact as an HR leader through using analytics. How can I create value? How can I actually ensure that the work that we're doing is actually leading to value for the business, either in monetary terms or value for employees? And what should I focus on? There are so many things that I could focus on, from building the team, sorting out the technology stack, cleaning the data, developing relationships with key stakeholders in the business. What should I focus on? So we took those three problems, and we also blended that with some research that we'd done ourselves, and Jonathan had from his experience of setting up people analytics at IBM, through Al's experience and others within the business as well. And we created this model, the 9 dimensions for excellence in people analytics, which some of our Insight222 clients have used. And really it's there, it's survey-based, but it's a diagnostic tool to understand how you're getting along at each of those 9 dimensions, and we dig into further stuff behind that. And then actually help you sometimes have a conversation with your HR leaders, but also understand what the priorities should be moving forward. So we're not going to go into that now, but if you want to find out more about the model, I've put a link there. And on the My HR Future site, Jonathan wrote a great blog, I think it came out last September, just talking a little bit more about each of those individual dimensions. We will talk a little bit about some of these, but we haven't got the time to go through all of them now. But what we are going to do, part of that survey, that 9 dimensions survey is about, well, I think it's over 100 questions. They're quite detailed, some of them. But what we did is we really started to analyse, was a quick survey that everyone can use. So yes, please scan the thing and start answering the questionnaire. It only takes 2 minutes to answer. And we came at 7 things that companies that are really pushing ahead with this are doing well. I'm going to walk through each of those 7 questions in a minute. But what it'd be great for you guys to do, if you could actually take the survey, either by using the QR code or just putting in myhrfuture.com/survey. And there's questions around, do you have an ethics charter for people analytics? Remember, you score 1 to 5. Remember your lowest score. What the question was with your lowest score. That's all I say, and then we'll do an exercise in a minute. So do you have an ethics code of conduct for people analytics? Are your people analytics projects selected and prioritized using strong governance and criteria? Do your senior business executives sponsor people analytics projects? Does your chief human resources officer invest in people analytics? Number 5, does your people analytics leader have the skills to get things done? Number 6, do you measure the ROI of your people analytics projects? And number 7, we've talked about it a lot the last couple of days, are your HR business partners capable of having evidence-based discussions? So it'll probably take you a minute or so to complete that. Once you've completed it, talk to the person next to you about your lowest score and why it was your lowest score and why it might be a challenge for you within people analytics within your organization. And if you're a vendor, maybe talk about some of what you see with some of the clients that you're talking to, or the clients that you've got around maybe the biggest challenge for you in these 7 areas. And we'll just spend a couple of minutes talking to yourselves about that. Okay, I'm conscious that we could probably talk about this for a while, but I'm also conscious that people have probably got planes to get to and homes to get to. So interestingly, I've restarted the conversation now. So interestingly, who had HR business partners as their top problem? Yeah? Who had ethics as their ethics charter as their problem? No? ROI on projects? There's quite a mixture, actually. The skills of the people analytics leader. I don't think there's going to be many people analytics leaders that say that, so especially in here. Chief human, the CHRO investing in people analytics. No, one or two there. Okay. Senior business executives sponsoring people analytics projects, so sponsorship. Yeah, one there. And selecting people analytics projects using governance, strong prioritization, governance and criteria. So a couple around there as well. Okay. Well, we're going to walk through some of those now. So those of you that were in with Dirk Peterson earlier in the Independence Room walked through the ethics charter that we developed with Insight222 in co-creation with 15 organizations last year. And we certainly found that you need to have a code of conduct for ethics because the field is moving so fast and the data sources that you can analyze are getting more and more rich. And obviously you've got loads of you working in global companies, there's multiple jurisdictions to deal with as well and different laws around data use. But one of the reasons that we've seen for this is the opportunity there. So this is a report that Accenture published at Davos earlier this year. Really good report. The title of it's there, so you'll be able to get hold of that for free. It's free to download. Very detailed report, but a couple of insights that came out of it. Firstly, of the 14,000 employees that were surveyed as part of it, 92% of them said that they were open to their companies collecting data about them as long as it provided them with personal benefit. And then the one on the right here, they did some analysis, Accenture, of the top 500 public listed organizations in the world. And they calculated that if they applied trust and they actually got they used the workforce data responsibly and they were to analyze it, there was a potential combined $3 trillion benefit there. And I think we'd all like that share within our organizations. So again, actually putting trust at the forefront of what we do. And that kind of backs up some analysis that we did at Insight222 when we were setting the business up a couple of years ago. So the question we asked to people analytics leaders and HR leaders were, are your people analytics projects jeopardized by ethics or privacy concerns? And the result that came back was that 4 out of every 5 projects are jeopardized by ethics. So I think ethics concerns. So definitely getting that ethics code of conduct in place and actually working with, not just doing it in isolation with people analytics, working with employee representative groups, obviously working with your chief privacy officer, working with senior stakeholders within the business as well. Looking at things like the culture, but also the law that you have to adhere to as well, and just getting that right policy in place, what's right for your particular organization. And an example, in fact, Dawn Klinghoffer, the head of people analytics at Microsoft, presented Microsoft's approach to this in San Francisco at PAFOW earlier this year. And she was kind enough to do an interview with me as well on the My HR Future blog. So again, you can actually dig in deep to this. But Microsoft take a really serious approach to this. They even have a privacy expert sitting on the people analytics team. And it's quite simple. They're very transparent about what they're doing. Be open to what data you're collecting, why you're collecting it, how it will be used, who has access to it. Purpose, have a clear hypothesis on why you want to collect that data and what you want to do with it. And to talk to what Ian O'Keefe said yesterday, if you had the answer to your question, what would you do differently? So actually having the intention to act on it as well. So that's very important with prioritization with the projects as well. And then value. What is the value that employees are going to get out of the data as well, the insights as well, and thinking about that. I think we're probably coming to a stage where if we can't articulate what the benefit would be to employees, then maybe we shouldn't do the project. And we also need to think about, how would we feel if details of the project got into the New York Times or any other particular newspaper? Would we feel proud or would we feel concerned? And if we're really concerned, then maybe we shouldn't do that project. So that's ethics. Our people analytics projects prioritize using proper governance and criteria. So Al's got a great prioritization model actually, which I haven't got on here. But I think the key thing here is and you've probably heard loads of people, we've had quite a few people saying this on stage today, don't start with the data, start with the business problem that you're trying to solve. Speak to people within the business. I think, Brad, I think I heard that particularly from you actually there, really understand what are the challenges that your organization are facing, and how can you help from a people analytics perspective, and framing those business questions that you can answer with analytics and developing some hypothesis that you can test. I think this is really key. If you start with data, you give data to a data scientist, they'll find something. They might spend 6 months doing it, like I saw a particular organization do that wanted to create a flight risk model. They did that in isolation without speaking to the business to find out if attrition was a problem anywhere. They spent 6 months perfecting it, and then they tested it. They were really happy with the accuracy. They went to the business, no one cared. Attrition was too low. So actually, that was exactly the wrong problem to solve. So framing the business questions is very important. An example here, so again, I've put quite a simple example up. This is from a company that at the time didn't have a people analytics function. So Virgin Media, a bit like Verizon in the UK, telecoms business, and B2C business as well. Their head of recruiting was really concerned that their recruitment team as a whole were really concerned that they had a bad problem with candidate experience. And they thought the candidate experience was so bad that it was costing them business, and that customers that were applying for jobs with Virgin Media were having such a bad experience, they were cancelling their subscriptions with Virgin Media and moving to a competitor. So they took this hypothesis and their recruiting data to the consumer analytics team, so again, leveraging data and expertise from elsewhere in the business, and said, is this something you'd be interested in partnering with us on? And the consumer analytics team were like, well, of course, because our job, is to do analysis around, how we retain and grow our customer base. And they did the analysis, and they found an interesting thing that over the previous 12 months, 7,500 Virgin Media customers that had applied for a job within Virgin Media had cancelled their subscriptions within 4 weeks of being in the recruitment process. So a pretty powerful insight. They calculated how much lost revenue that was, and that was £4.4 million, which still is quite a lot of money, even with Brexit. And because they got that insight, they got the permission and the budget and the time to go away and completely redesign the candidate experience. And what I really liked about this is they didn't just see this as a way to save money. They looked at academic research into, if you're a B2C company, you provide a really great customer experience, can we actually convert non-Virgin Media customers into customers by delighting them so much during the process? And they saw that there was a potential opportunity to grow 5.6 million of revenue. And they completely redesigned the candidate process based on what it was like to be a customer with Virgin Media. So again, little subtle points to potential applicants as well. So nice and simple, and you could clearly see the particular business value with that one. Are all major people analytics projects sponsored by a business leader? Very, very important. Get a sponsor for every piece of analytics work. We've seen this time and time again with companies. Even if the project's quite cool and they get some really good insights, if you haven't got a sponsor in the business who's prepared to do something about it, then you might be wasting your time. So I think having that clear line of sight to the sponsor, involving them at the start, understanding what they actually would be prepared to do about it. I think we've seen that from several presenters over the last couple of days, that there is a burning problem that they do want to take action on, and then working with them through that process as well. And understanding that sometimes these projects can take quite a long time, continually going back to the sponsor and making sure that it is still a problem and they are still going to do something about it. Very important. Okay, does the Chief HR Officer invest in people analytics? Well, clearly they should, but not all Chief HR Officers are. I think that's changing, to be perfectly honest. There aren't many heads of people analytics that I've seen that report directly into the CHRO. Bridie was one of the exceptions, I think, during the time that she was doing that. I don't think it's as important to do that. I think as long as you've got someone senior within HR, if it is even inside HR that you're reporting, I think that's important. But I think when people analytics teams are too far buried down the HR organisation or in even one of the silos within HR, it's very hard to be doing work that's actually going to have an impact and to affect change. So I think that's very important. So I think, Al, you were asking Brad and Vanessa what's one of the questions that you would ask. If I was in the interview process as a prospective head of people analytics, I'd want to meet the CHRO and find out from them if they were really serious about people analytics in terms of investing in it, but also believing that it was an important part of what they wanted to do with HR. And if I wasn't convinced, I wouldn't take that job. It's simple as that. So an example of a CHRO that is invested in analytics is the CHRO at Clarks in the UK. So Clarks is a shoe wear. They make shoes, and there's about 500 stores in the UK. Do you have Clarks in the US? You do. So in the UK, I don't know if it's the same here, it's where you go to get your kids' school shoes. And what they wanted to understand, they've been doing engagement surveys for a long time. And what the CHRO really wanted to understand was actually, is engagement a leading or a lagging indicator in Clarks? And the reason why she was particularly interested in this is she was continually being asked by her fellow board members, can we improve engagement? And she thought, well, we can try and improve engagement, but actually what is the business value of doing so? They found that actually engagement was a leading indicator of business performance in Clarks. And they found that actually over the course of the year, that was worth 1% increase was worth £68 million, which is, quite a lot of money, to be perfectly honest with you. So again, what that helped them to do is then say, okay, because it's retail, we can actually compare high-performing, mid-performing, and low-performing stores quite easily. And they started to understand what are the key drivers of engagement within our stores. And they found that the higher-performing stores, they had there was two main elements that they saw. One was the whole spans and layers thing. So the more people that were reporting to a store manager or a unit manager or a deputy manager within a store, the more likely the engagement was going to be lower. So that made them really think about the structure and how they structured their stores. And then the second point was around the tenure of the store manager. And they found that was a really important predictor of engagement within the store and as such performance. And what they'd been doing, like a lot of retail companies, they'd been parachuting high-performing managers into lower-performing stores to help to try and boost sales there. And although that worked, they found that the negative impact on the more high-performing stores was actually worse. So that made them think again around their sort of how they moved store managers around. And what it really did is it really showed the importance of engagement. So then they started putting more HR programs and HR training in place to actually really equip store managers, prospective store managers and unit managers within the retail branches about the importance of engagement and how to actually derive that from their teams. So again, showing, and again, that direct site to business improvement there as well. Does the people analytics leader get things done and create value? Well, we've seen a lot of people analytics leaders on stage in the last 2 days. Those are the sorts of people analytics leaders that you want in your business because they can get things done and create value. And if we look at skills that are particularly important for people analytics leaders, I think yesterday you saw Ian O'Keefe on stage talking about the various skills that he wanted to have within his people analytics function and how only a unicorn would have all of those skills. And I think it's the same with these 6 skills that Jonathan and his co-authors for The Power of People found. 6 buckets of skills, but probably the ones in green are the ones that we see are particularly relevant for people analytics leaders. So really good business acumen and political astuteness as well. So you can actually get things done. You know how to get things done within your organization. Communications and consulting. So the consulting part doesn't always have to be the people analytics leader that does this, but typically we find that the people analytics leader does have these really good consulting skills and or employs people that can actually do the consulting or the translation of the work that some of the more technical people are doing. So again, thinking about the skills within your team, ideally that you can recruit into the team itself, but if you don't have the budget to hire 6 or 7 people, then maybe where can you get access to some of those skills within the organization, or maybe who you can partner with externally as well to help you progress. 6th one is return on investment. So are you measuring the return on investment? Are you measuring the outcomes of the work that you're doing? And I think we find that a lot of teams aren't doing this. It's, okay, they've actioned we've done a project, or we've created a product, it's been implemented, great, let's move on to the next thing. The thing that we find that a lot of companies aren't doing very well is actually measuring the actual outcomes of this. And this is pretty important, because if you can actually start measuring the return to the business on the work that you're doing, then that's going to help you grow and increase influence, and also hopefully create that data-driven culture and bring some of the HR business partners particularly on board as well. So Piyush Mehta, who leads people analytics at Johnson & Johnson, he said this at the PAFOW conference in San Francisco this year, and I thought it was really good. Doesn't matter about insights. It doesn't even matter about actions on the insights. But if you don't get the outcomes, it's just overhead. It's just work. So I thought that was that resonated with me. And just an example, this is a little bit of fun. This is an example of how data can really start to produce ROI. I think we can take a lot of inspiration from what marketing are doing, the stories that they're telling with data, and how they measure ROI on pretty much everything they do. So there are some Australians. Are there still some Australians in the room? Yeah. This is an Australian advert. So can you play the video? So I don't trust myself. Oh, no. So this will only mean something to those that like cricket, but a couple of weeks ago, I suspect the price of Snickers bars was very low after Ben Stokes' heroics. So yeah, I mean, I think we can learn a lot from marketing about how measuring the return on investment of the work that we do. And certainly at IBM, we did that within the scoping part of any work, any analytics projects that we did at IBM. We actually sat down with finance and agreed how we were going to measure the return on investment of the project at the outset, and obviously followed that through from implementation. And an example there, IBM, the first project that the IBM People Analytics team did back in 2010 was linked to attrition of some key talent segments, and particularly key talent segments in the parts of the business that IBM was looking to grow as part of its transformation. So it was 2 years after the crisis, so perhaps you would expect some key talent to be leaving as the economy starts to pick up. And what they did through this analysis is they found that IBM only had annual salary increases. They found that for certain key job roles, they needed to look at doing other salary increases throughout the year, and they used a predictive retention model to do that. So this 300 million of net benefit was estimated once that process had been in place for around 5 years, and it's written about in the book there. But really significant, return to the business, and created a huge amount of momentum around people analytics within IBM. So the team there now is well over 70 people, and it's infused throughout the talent lifecycle. Diane Gerson, the CHRO, is particularly good at going out there and talking about some of the stuff that IBM's doing. There was a case study, I think, earlier this year that was in the Sloan Management Review, which you can find online, around how IBM completely redesigned its performance management system in conjunction with employees, how they've improved the employee experience, all tied to people analytics. And it is a good idea. People at IBM and Microsoft and some of the companies you've seen on stage over the last 2 days really show you where you can get with people analytics. So. And I don't work at IBM anymore, but I still think their people analytics is very impressive. And then the last key thing is around HR business partners having evidence-based discussions. And I think this is, from certainly the organizations that I'm talking to and we're talking to at Insight222, I think it's still the biggest challenge. Even in companies that have been doing people analytics for 5 or 6 years and have had a lot of success, they still have this challenge of turning the rest of the HR function around. Not all of them, but a significant proportion of HR business partners seem to be analytically resistant. There are some, of course, that are analytically willing and analytically savvy. And I think sometimes it's about identifying those and trying to use those to try and encourage the rest to get on. But I think we have to accept that there will be some of our colleagues in HR who will never be comfortable doing analytics. And as we look to the HR professional of the future, it might help us in terms of how we staff those functions. So we're in the middle of some research at the moment at Insight222 and My HR Future. Our hypothesis is that there are 6 main factors influencing the adoption of people analytics, and we've had a survey out there and some other research around testing that. And I think the report, with some interesting insights that we've seen, the report should be coming out probably later in September or early October. So that will be available on the My HR Future site, and no doubt I'll be writing some articles around that as well. There's lots of interesting ways in which organizations have tried to enable that data literacy within their HR business partners. There's lots of training out there, and I've seen certainly in IBM, we had an extensive program in place, training over 700 HR business partners, and that did certainly have some effect. I think the fact that the directive really came from the top, from a CHRO who was really bought into analytics and was making it very clear that it was a skill that was required, I think that helped as well. But this is an interesting, and again, you can read this on the My HR Future site. So Patrick Coulan is the head of people analytics at ABN AMRO. It's definitely someone I'd recommend following on LinkedIn if you're not already following. He normally writes 1 or 2 articles a year sharing some of the stories that they're doing at ABN AMRO. They've been doing a lot of work around employee experience in the last year or so. But they actually created an escape room for people analytics as part of trying to encourage HR business partners. So who's done an escape room before? Yeah? So similar sort of concept, except that the problem they were trying to solve was around HR. So they had people from the people analytics team in there to try and help the people being trained. And then a video came on at the start from the CHRO saying there was a crisis, there was a scandal about to break. He needed to have some answers to some questions because he was facing the press in 45 minutes. There was a range of different data sources on the table. And what the trainees had to do is create a story through that data. Some of those data was red herrings as well. Create a story which they could then present to the CHRO 45 minutes later. And if the story was good enough, they got out of the room. And they found that this was a really good way of engaging the HR business partner community. And it's a very novel way of doing it. And I've seen other organizations doing quite novel things to try and get their HR business partners on board. But it's worth it. So I was at a conference in India at the start of August, and Lena Nair, who's the CHRO of Unilever, another CHRO who really advocates the use of data within HR and has done some fantastic work there. She was on stage, and I've heard her say this before actually. Her analytics team have the insight that one of the insights that they've produced is that for every $1 that Unilever invests in employee wellness, they get a $2.50 return. And if that's not a nice way to end, showing that people data can be used for good, I don't know what is. So thank you very much.